Guys, ask and ye shall receive, right? So the point of that is to tell you that it's okay to ask about safety. So if you're applying for a company and you are brought into the interview process, a lot of people are very hesitant when it concerns how far can you go with your questions. And they feel that if they ask about safety, then they are interrogating the company or the interviewer, and they won't come off well. And it really depends on how you go about it. So there's always a point in the interview process where they say, do you have any questions for us? And let's say you go through the whole interview process and not one word about safety was mentioned, and you're just deeply curious about it. It's okay to ask the interviewer at that point in time about their safety culture, about the safety that's going on in the company. So yes, it is okay to ask about this in an interview process, as long as you ask about it in the right way. You want to come off as very inquisitive, okay? So there's a way that you can ask these questions where you can come off almost to the point of just general knowledge about the safety program. Yeah, I'm very curious about your safety program. Have you had any incidents worth noting in the past, year or a couple of years? Or I'm interested in your training program. Does your training program include a safety portion where you teach new employees basically how to act and behave and where they can find things in the lab? That's a very inquisitive nature, not an interrogative nature. Like, have you ever had a safety incident in the past year? And if so, how bad was it? That's coming off a little bit too harsh, and you don't want to do that at all. So you want to come off as inquisitive. You want to come off as basically having a general knowledge. You want to show them that you understand the importance of safety in a lab or with in the industrial setting, right? You might not be working in the actual lab, but you'll be working for a company that will have a safety program in place. So come across that you've got a general knowledge, that you're just really inquisitive about what's going on, and that you appreciate the safety and the safety program that they might implement. So this is basically saying, I understand that safety incidents are a major concern for a company. It can lead to bad press. It can lead to lower amounts of money or profit for a company. And I just want to make sure that we are being safe as much as possible so we can prevent this from happening to the company. It's always the company's best interest, right? So don't come across as an interrogator or a detective, right? Have you ever had a safety violation? Or what's your relationship like with OSHA, right? You don't want to actually come across and ask those. Now, again, OSHA, OSHA, is Occupational Safety and Health Hazard or Association. So they want to make sure that you are following and the company is implementing safety in their workforce, and they're putting your health as the number one priority. So we'll talk about OSHA a little bit more later on, but that's what OSHA stands for. Most companies, I'm not going to say all, will provide what we call PPE. And again, in a previous video that was introduced, and that's called personal protective equipment. So most of the time they will give you goggles, they will give you lab coats, they will give you anything that you need, or they will give you money to let you buy what you need. So sometimes if you're working out in the field, you'll need steel-toed boots. And instead of providing those to you directly, they will give you a money allocation where you can go out and buy your own steel-toed boots, and they will reimburse you or they will include that on your paycheck. So most companies will provide all of the PPE that you need for your direct job, right? If you don't need steel-toed boots, they're not going to buy them, right? That's a waste of money. They're only going to buy them for the people that actually need them. If you're staying in the lab all the time, you don't need steel toe, but you need closed toe. So just keep that in mind from that point on. A good employer will welcome suggestions after you get hired. right? So you can make suggestions all that you want. If you get into a lab space and you realize that something could happen and an incident could happen and there are hazards and there's risk associated, then you can make those suggestions after you get employed. So talk to your supervisor. Go to your supervisor and say, listen, we're working with a lot of open flame, and I've noticed that a lot of the people in here have long hair. So should we make a safety suggestion about pulling back the long hair or putting hair up into some kind of net like they do at a restaurant so it doesn't get into the way? So make the suggestions, right? They're not going to get angry with you over the suggestion. Your suggestion might not be implemented, but at least you've said your piece. And as long as you've done that, then you can feel much better about yourself. So do it after you get hired, not before. And just keep in mind that your idea of safety might be different than the overall concept of safety at the lab. Some people go way too far with it. I've had students before that will wear full face shields working with water, right? And you might laugh, but that's a true statement. So some people go crazy with it. Don't be a crazy person. Let's use some common sense. There are certain things that you don't have to do. You can be overly protected, and that's as bad as if you're not protected enough, right? So there are laws and regulations. Laws and regulations are not the same, okay? There's laws and regulations that promote safety in a laboratory. And again, this comes from OSHA, Occupational Safety and Health Administration. So Occupational Safety and Health Administration. OSHA has their own website. It's OSHA.gov, I believe. They're a government organization. And OSHA has implemented some regulations, basically, that all employers should follow. So all employers, doesn't matter who you are. You can be a big major company or a small mom and pop place that are working out of your garage maybe. But all employers have to meet what we call the minimum standards. And those minimum standards are very important. They're minimum standards outlined by OSHA. So depending on your type of company, you will go to that section of OSHA. You will read about the standards that they have put in place that everyone should meet minimally. Okay? Now, OSHA is not the only people that are involved in this mess. The other company, another government organization, is EPA, Environmental Protection Agency. And they will regulate waste that is being generated by a lab, okay? If you are pumping waste out of some type of drainage and it's going into a river, lake, stream, soil, or air, then they're going to pay a very close attention to the waste disposal. And they're going to implement their own regulations concerning this disposal. So they will regulate waste, that's the key word, associated with a company, especially chemical ones. Okay, but that's the role of the EPA. We also have another government organization that has come into the picture, and that's DOT, D-O-T, Department of Transportation. Department of Transportation regulates shipping, right? That's why they're called Department of Transportation. So if I'm making a product like a chemical at a company, and that chemical gets loaded up on, like, say, an 18-wheeler, 16-wheeler, whatever, and they're driving down the interstate, well, that's shipping, that's handling, right? So as that chemical is on the road, what should be done in case that rig turns over or that rig gets into an accident? What could happen to cause a type of incident to go on that we can prevent, right? So they're going to regulate the shipping and transportation of the chemical products that leave a company. That company could make those chemicals. That company could sell those chemicals to others. So for instance, when we order chemicals through Fisher, which is a major chemical supplier, Fisher doesn't make anything. They just sell it. When we order it, that chemical has to be shipped to us. Well, it doesn't matter if they didn't make it. They're shipping it from their location to us. So they have to make sure that the Department of Transportation regulations are met before it goes on these trucks to be delivered halfway across the United States. Okay? And then finally, we have another company, and that organization is called the CDC. The CDC stands for Center of Disease Control. And CDC will basically focus on biologicals, right? These are typically pathogens, typically bacteria, some kind of virus. That's what the Center of Disease Control really pays attention to. So as far as the chemical industry is concerned and what we do, very often we do not have to worry with the CDC. The CDC is more biotechnology related. It's more DNA related, protein related. It's more virus and bacteria related. If they basically allow you to sell E. coli to a company, then the E. coli has to be maintained because we cannot let that spread and overtake the storage room or overtake the laboratory that it's shipped to. So how do we handle those? How do we maintain them? And how do we dispose of them? That's what the CDC is going to enforce and regulate. CDC also does this job hand in hand with the USDA, the United States Department of Agriculture, USDA, United States Department of Agriculture. So you see them play a hand in the biologicals as well. That's something that's becoming more and more common in the agricultural industry. So those are a couple of the government organizations that we need to worry with when we work in a laboratory, whatever type of laboratory or company that might be. Okay? All right. So let's kind of sum up here. And we're going to sum it up and we're going to say you need to value safety. All right? If you value safety, you're good. Okay? You've got to understand why certain things are in place the way that they are. You also have to work safely. You want to educate yourself on what you're doing in the laboratory and make sure that it's okay. You want to follow the rules and understand why the rules is there. You want to prevent at-risk behavior. If you see something that's out of line that can be prevented, then you need to stand up and you need to say it. Recognize the risk and minimize the risk. That's what I'm going to say about this. Recognize and minimize. Part of your ramp. You also want to promote safety. Don't feel like you're, the nerd of the bunch if you look at someone and say you need to wear goggles or you need to wear gloves, right? You're going to promote safety. You want to encourage other people to follow the safety outline. And doing that, you will help lower the chances of an incident. And that's good for everyone, the workers and the company both. And finally, you want to accept responsibility, people. Again, no one else is going to do it for you. You've got to do it on your own. So accept responsibility. If something happens, what did you do? And what could you have done differently to prevent it? Right? That's always the question that we ask ourselves. Don't put the blame on others. You accept responsibility for what happened. You think about what you could have done differently and make sure that you do that differently from then on out. And that's what we call our safety ethic. Okay? We all should have ethics in place, and safety should be a part of that. And these are kind of some of the basic foundation or building blocks of that safety ethic. All right, so that's all that we need to say about this section and about this topic. I think that you've maybe walked away with more now than what you did before you've watched it. But we've got a couple of videos left before we kind of sum up this whole intro to safety lecture. That's what all of this is about, right? It's introduction to safety, how you should behave, how a lab should behave, and how to handle yourself once you do get a job. So after this kind of first module, we'll kind of turn a different look and we'll go deeper into the organization and the storage of a laboratory facility. But again, this is just a general overview of what safety is all about.